Welcome to today's program, and thank you for joining us. I'm C. Virginia Fields, former Manhattan Borough President and current President, CEO of the National Black Leadership Commission on AIDS, Inc. The mission of the National Black Leadership Commission on AIDS, also known as NBLCA, is to educate, mobilize, and empower Black leaders to meet the challenge of fighting HIV/AIDS and other health disparities in their local communities. Today, we will talk about the recent events in Charlottesville, Virginia, and discuss how bigotry, racism, and hate penetrates all aspects of our society. What we saw in Charlottesville, Virginia, was a very obvious and violent display of racism and hate. Displays of white supremacy and nationalism are not the only manifestations of bigotry. We see it in our healthcare system, in the crusade against voting rights, in immigration policies, budget proposals, and in all processes of our democracy. And here today to discuss how faith leaders confront these issues is Imam Talib Abdur Rashid and Bishop Nancy Rosario. Imam Talib is the religious and spiritual leader of the Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood, Inc. in Harlem, although he moves throughout the world. And he has served on various interfaith coalitions in New York City and is a prominent advocate for Muslims living with HIV/AIDS. Nancy Rosario is a bishop of the Church of God's Children in the Bronx. She too is internationally known and active, and she serves as the president of the Bronx Clergy Task Force, which is an interfaith coalition and a leader in her community. Bishop Rosario and Imam Talib are members of NBLCA's faith-based initiative. So welcome to both of you. And Imam, I'm sorry I misplaced your last name. I don't think I said it right. As long as I have known you and as long as we have worked together, no excuse.
This being the moderator is more difficult than people know until they have to do it.
Until they have to do it. But I'm so glad that both of you are here.
Thank you.
Imam and Bishop. And again, we really want to touch upon a series of events that have just shaken all of us with respect to the brazen violence and acts of hatred that the world saw in Charlottesville, Virginia. And for many of us, certainly who lived through the civil rights violence of the 60s and thereafter, seeing this brought back a lot of what we ourselves experienced, and probably had thought, yeah, we know racism is there, and we know that we deal with acts of bigotry and hatred on many different levels, but to see it played out this way is something that I don't think we were quite prepared for. So let me just ask both of you in your respective positions, and I'm glad that you're here representing various areas of our faith community, that how have you dealt with the events in your houses of worship or even as part of other coalitions? You want to begin, Bishop?
Well, in our houses of worship, we dealt with, first of all, we had to deal with the anger that the people felt. Our congregation members, our community, people, other clergy. We had to deal with their anger and then give them an understanding of the root of this anger is there. It's been there. You said something very interesting. You said that the world is seeing. And when we speak of America, United States, the world is seeing what's happening in the United States, and it's embarrassing. We should be a nation that has some kind of a root in the goodness that there is as America, United States. It says United States of America, and yet we're presenting to the world a divided state of America. So we've been dealing with it by helping our people understand that hatred and bigotry has always been a part of this world. Any hate group, is never right. There's no hate group that's right. They're all motivated by hate, and they have no place in our society. And and the way to deal with it is, we can say pray, which we do. We pray for God's divine intervention, but at the same time, we need to go out there and keep promoting peace. Keep promoting peace. We can't stop promoting that peace. It creates. I was seeing it's very interesting. I have to, if you don't mind. I was just seeing this very interesting picture that I saw. I don't know how someone took it, but there's no author of it. You see a black NYPD officer. He's actually protecting the rights of the people behind him, and behind him, what you see is a man hailing Heil Hitler. You see another one with the red hood, and another person, the Confederate flag on his shoulder. And the black NYPD officer is standing in front, very quietly, protecting the rights of these people. This is the United States of America, but that's creating hate, promoting hate.
Promoting
okay?
it, right.
And he's in front trying to say, in the midst of all this chaos, I'm in front trying to bring peace to this chaotic world.
So we see in this particular case, a black man, black police officer, still committed to individual rights, social justice, protection, in the midst of all of this hate. Amazing.
In the midst of all this chaos right behind him going on, and he's just standing there with his head bowed down, taking into reality the vow that he committed to protect the people.
Okay, so Imam, talk a little about how you've dealt with the events in your places of worship and beyond.
Well, yes, Mrs. Fields, at the Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood, we are, as a matter of fact, just 2 months ago, we became 50 years old as a congregation.
Wow.
So the year of our birth was 1967. And we are the lineal descendant of the Muslim Mosque Incorporated, founded by Al-Hajj Malik el-Shabazz Malcolm X in 1964. So we are very rooted in the reality of what Malcolm X used to call the hypocrisy of democracy. And as the leader of that congregation, and as someone born in the South, you were born in Birmingham. I was born in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Oh yes,
Okay,
you
so
come out of that real historic
absolutely.
time.
In fact, the last major attack of the KKK on a freedom demonstration was in 1979 in Greensboro, North Carolina. And on that occasion, I think it was about 7 or 8 people were gunned down by members of the KKK. So there is a tragic cycle in play here. Again, we at the mosque, and I think we're very typical of the Muslim African American community, we're always reality centered. We are aware, for instance, just a few years ago, we lost one of our great African American professors of history, Dr. Vincent Harding. And Dr. Vincent Harding, who wrote the first draft for Dr. Martin Luther King's Why I'm Against the War in Vietnam speech. During the last years of his life, Dr. Harding actually stopped using the phrase civil rights movement. And he began to refer to the 60s and that struggle in the early 70s as a black-led freedom movement for the expansion of democracy in America. So I'm very much aware of this. I knew Dr. Harding, and because of my own background as a leader and that of my congregation, when we saw events unfolding, it was more than just for us a deja vu. It was a stark reminder that the entire country is still dealing with the toxic effects of this cancer called racism, just as you said, white nationalism, white supremacy. I'm a person who uses words a lot, so I listen a lot to words. And during the last presidential campaign cycle, when Donald Trump was coined that phrase, "Make America Great Again." But then before him, when Barack Obama was running for the presidency, the phrase was, "Take our country back." And so, see, these code words, these dog whistles, reveal a reality.
Yeah.
And the reality is that black people, brown people, people of color, poor white people in America are still locked in a struggle. And it's a life and death struggle for freedom in America.
Listening to a lot of what Imam has just said, and think about an understanding of our collective histories, our past, how we have either experienced such acts of discrimination, and looking at our school systems today, the fact that very little, if anything, is taught about Hispanic heritage, Black heritage, history, that would help our students at least gain more of an understanding of that past, to be able to do better now and into the future. Bishop, speak, if you will, about how do we better educate our children or bring into the forefront historical perspectives to help break down cycles of violence and hatred, racism and bigotry?
I believe it starts in the home, number one. And from a biblical perspective, where even Moses told his people, everything we've been through, being brought out of slavery in Egypt, going to the desert and going into war, says, give these stories to every generation and to your children and children's children. Our children, our families, and our children, they need to know the past history. And it comes from grandparents, parents, up to the third and fourth generation. We forget to give our children the history. Right now, as we were talking outside, some of these young people, neo-Nazis that appeared, they were young people. So they're obviously learning that from where it's coming from, the home. It's not just happening in the schools. It's coming from the home, and they drag it into the schools. And then parents, and we should get involved in our school system, be involved in what they're teaching. You remember, you go to college, when we went to college, it was like, oh, we were teaching the American history. And we're like, no, we want to know the real American history.
Aren't we too Americans?
How we
right?
too, have a part in this whole say. You're teaching us your little Columbus and America Vespucci and all that. We want to know the real truth, the stuff that's not in the books. Let's research our own history. And that's where I think we need to take an integral part in, the community. Violence is everywhere. It's in our homes. Right now, I just came from Grandmother's Love Over Violence. And this is not grandmothers that are being violated. These are grandmothers bringing up their children or their grandchildren who have been violated, who have come from an abusive home and all that. You have children. How do you tell a 17-year-old girl not to have hate or grow up with hate when her abusive father has killed her mother? So hate keeps begetting hate. Right now, this that happened in Charlottesville, it doesn't create any peace. It brings back, it's not just deja vu, it brings back the anger. It's going to bring back the memories to the grandparents, to the parents. So now that they have the obligation to tell them, listen, we went through this, we've come this far. It's like Martin Luther King said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. You have to have the light. Christ was crucified, and everybody says he was crucified by the Jews. He was crucified by people who just hated and couldn't understand and didn't want any part of him bringing in something new and bringing in peace. Every person that has tried to bring in peace, they get crucified, they get murdered. It's a never-ending cycle in our world. But we have the promise of peace. And we keep saying, God bless America. And I keep saying, God bless America, I hope.
Let me just go right there, because I agree with what the bishop just said. I'll also quote something from the Bible. You know, imams quote from the Bible and the Quran.
Amen.
So in the Bible, you know, it's written that the people shall perish for want of knowledge.
Lack of knowledge,
And
absolutely.
and in too many cases, in the home, we have abdicated our responsibility for
Yes.
being the first teachers of our children. And so then we take our children, we send them to a school. You know, this is, when you start talking about white nationalism, white supremacy in America, one of the great intellectual arguments coming from out of that is the whole concept of the opposition that comes from those quarters to a multicultural America. And so this whole concept that America is a quote-unquote white Christian nation as opposed to a multicultural nation, and really always has been a multicultural nation.
Absolutely.
It lends itself to a suppression of some of the very things that we fought for during the 60s, when I was growing up, you know, and I'm a little older than Mrs. Fields. So she, but she'll remember, as do I, that, you know, after all of that upheaval and all of that turmoil, one of the deliverables that was being pushed for was diversifying history in the schools, from public school up through the college level, so that the history of Spanish-speaking Americans or the history of African Americans is not just for a day or a month,
Forever.
you know, in the school system. So, and there's always been pushback against that. And also, Dr. Fields, this is what we're in now. We're in the era of pushback. When these people were talking about take the country back, make the country great again, they were actually talking about pushing back against reforms and progress made specifically in 1964 and 1965 with the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and the Immigration and Nationalization Act. So these were great pieces of American legislation
That's right.
that negative, counterproductive forces in the society, as exemplified by the rhetoric of now President Trump, have been pushing.
And as I, you know, listen to both of you, and I agree fully with respect to what needs to happen in the homes, in the schools, in our houses of worship. And when we think about the vast, the issues that we have to deal with, whether it's in education, in housing, in healthcare,
Yes.
and of course in the work that both of you are engaged with in BLCA as it relates to fighting stigma in HIV and AIDS. When we put all of this together, how do we, or how can we, at least because both of you have been involved with interfaith coalitions, how can we perhaps now take this opportunity, given all of what has to be looked at within how racism, discrimination penetrates all of these areas
Yes.
for us, how working at least through the interfaith coalitions, we might be able to create a different path to coming up with ways for addressing this crisis that we are now faced with. But let's start with you, Imam.
Yes, well, I mean, you've hit it right on the head. First, I'm glad you mentioned the houses of worship, because one of the things that has happened over the decades is that too many voices of leadership in the faith community that should be faith-inspired to struggle toward justice have been muted. And so the muting of these voices, you know, pastors, rabbis, imams, they don't want to get too involved in these type of problems, and the people are suffering. So as you point out, Bishop and myself, we are from a prophetically inspired social justice tradition. And we're not talking hypothetically here. We're here in New York, in New York City, over the past several years, and especially since the election of POTUS 45, you're seeing a growing coalition of faith leaders, Christians, Muslims, Jews, and others, who are coming together, not just to protest, but are coming together trying to figure out ways to push back against the pushback of those people who want to deprive us of the freedom that every American is supposed to enjoy. And this is happening even as we speak.
I gotta say, hashtag we will not stop.
Yes.
We cannot stop. We have to push on for the rights of the people, and it's gonna take people like us and teaching our children and children's children to take leadership roles. Dr. Fields, you came up, you were borough president of Manhattan. You made a difference in making rights. You went on to being the leadership of NBLCA, going into the health area. I'm a New York born Hispanic of Puerto Rican descent. When I found out, going back in history, saying that Americans went to Puerto Rico and were actually, according to them, doing health care for the women when they were actually sterilizing them,
That's right.
not to have any more kids. And all of a sudden, a few years later, they go to the kindergarten classes and there's no children, okay? Greed and jealousy and fear has encompassed our world. The interfaith, I'm in awe and I am blessed. And it's a rewarding experience when we deal through the Bronx Street Task Force and my husband, Bishop Rosario, with interfaith, with all the faith there is. And like my husband said, we all have some type of faith. Everyone has faith. They have faith to die and they have faith to live. But we all have faith and we're all humans. God did not create any particular race. He created a human race. Right now, if you get shot, if you get stabbed, if I get involved in a bomb, we're all going to bleed the same blood.
Absolutely.
We're all going to bleed the same blood. And that blood, the three of us could be the same, and that blood is going to trickle, and it's going to join, and it's not going to know where it's coming from or who it's coming from. Okay? But we as human beings, we label people. We decide to label people. And I got to say again, we can't stop. We got to teach our children to take a leadership role, to fight for their country, to fight for the rights. We can't stop. Woman, man, children, everyone has to get involved, and we got to fight and fight and fight for the rights of the people and the rights of our country.
Our young people have to learn from us.
Yes.
We have to model what we are preaching, because as you said, with great accuracy, the cancer of racism in America, it impacts every aspect of public life in this nation. And so, you know, as we and you asked at the very beginning, how do we deal with this in my congregation? Well, in my congregation, we believe in sublimating our anger. We try to transform our righteous indignation into action by speaking out, by organizing, by acting in coalition with other people. This is what we do at the Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood. And that's what must be done. Because every time people have tried to make progress in America, there have always been other people pushing back against their efforts. So if we can come together as we are here today, under your leadership, and organize, we can't just protest. We have to organize and make a difference.
Correct. And it has to be consistent and can't stop for the
can't
moment.
stop, right.
Absolutely.
We can't just see an incident and we all become emotionally charged, as we do,
Yes.
because I've been just on an emotional roller coaster recently with so many things that are happening. And I heard someone say recently, and it did affect me, which was, for those of us who have truly been blessed and we have the knowledge, we have the information, we have the experience, not to find ways to
Exactly.
use that in what is happening in our country and throughout the world today, then we are not doing showing why blessings are being given to us, which is to be spread around.
That's right.
So I think that I'm hopeful. I am very hopeful because I believe that we do have a lot to do, and we've got to unmute, as you said, Iman, some of these
people are
faith
seeking
leaders.
People are seeking truth. They're seeking truth, but they're seeking their own truth. You know, God is the only one that can give us the discernment to know what the real truth is, and He is a God of peace. Okay, but in His peace, He gives us authority and power. We have an authority as faith-based leaders. We have an authority that is beyond the universe of this world, but we don't know how to use it.
And the God of peace is also a God of justice.
Exactly.
So a critical element of this process is intergenerational struggle. We have to be supporting our young people when they're out there, as many of us were out there when we were young, and we have to support them, and we have to work with them and talk with them instead of at them, so that there'll be this relationship, so that they won't repeat some of the same mistakes that we made, and we move forward.
And we never have enough time, and this has been one of those topics that we could certainly spend much more time on, but I think a lot has been said, and I like that in an interracial struggle, we must work at that. So let me thank both of you for joining me today, and the dialogue and the actions will indeed continue.
Yes,
Amen.
ma'am.
So I'd like for you to learn more about NBLCA at our website, NBLCA.org. Also look for NBLCA on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. The Manhattan Neighborhood Network brings these programs to you to better inform you, the viewer, about the important topics that impact your health and well-being. So please let your family, friends, and neighbors know about this programming. I am C. Virginia Fields. Thank you for joining us, and hope you'll tune in next time for NBLCA's Health Action TV right here on Manhattan Neighborhood Network.